Brothers and sisters, do you have a problem with masturbation? Then let the governing body and Jehovah help you beat it.
Hi there, YouTube, and welcome to this special episode of Sex in the Watchtower, where we delve into the strange and unsettling obsession with sex in the Jehovah's Witness religious group. Please be advised that this series covers explicit subject matter and is not appropriate for children, pets, or overly sensitive houseplants. Today we have a few special guests, the first of which is James Winner from the Exjw Former to Free channel. Now, James recently posted a really good video all about the Jehovah's Witnesses and their obsession with masturbation. One thing that was missing from that discussion, though, mainly because it's missing from the Watchtower discussion for the most part, was a female perspective. And you know that if anyone's gonna tackle that, it's gonna be Sister Fister. Buckle up, y'all. It's going to be a long one.
That's what she said.
Today, we are going to examine several articles and publications ranging from 1959 to the late 90s, some of which we may have covered before. But don't worry, I promise not to bore you. We'll also talk to a few former sisters about their experiences as well. Flogging the bishop.
Flicking the bean.
Well, I've done it about as long as I can remember. I used to get in trouble for it a lot.
Questions from readers. But what about single persons who, for one reason or another, cannot find pleasurable relief from this tension in the honorable marriage bed? Among the many who find themselves in this position are those too young to marry or financially unable to do so, the deserted, the unscripturally divorced, widows and widowers, those having mates off at sea, in hospitals, or in mental institutions. Shocking. Why would their mates be off at sea? I mean, witnesses aren't allowed to join the Navy, and I don't think they'd be allowed to be pirates either. I mean, I guess maybe there are witnesses who work on fishing boats or in shipping or something, but then I kind of doubt it, because how would they make it to meetings or out in the field ministry then? And I'm also slightly surprised by the mental institutions too. I mean, since Jehovah's Witnesses are staunchly against psychotherapy for the most part, somebody would have to be real bad off to be institutionalized, you know? Is this a common thing? I mean, common enough for them to be concerned with preventing their poor spouses from having any sort of sex life at all? How can the problem of all these be solved? By masturbation? By fondling one's sex organs, or by letting the mind dwell on the pleasures of sex so as to gain relief by what is also known as an orgasm? My! Not for Christians. They've put the word orgasm in quotes as if it's like not really a thing. Also, the way they've worded this is really bizarre, as if orgasm and masturbation are synonymous.
The whole idea of doing the historical context behind it was to see how other cultures throughout history before Christianity looked at it and viewed it. It was just amazing. Like, it was no big deal. Right. It was something people did normally. Of course, what do they always tell you? How all their literature and everything they write is based off what? The Bible? How many times in the Bible does it talk about masturbation? Exactly. They always love to use the scripture about Odin, but
which
Odin
is
not masturbation. He did the pull-out method.
Yeah.
And then the other scripture about deadening your body members.
Yeah.
You know, none of it has anything to do with masturbation whatsoever. In the time of the Egyptians and the Greeks, and they were all good with it. Nobody cared. You know, I mean, hell, Cleopatra made devices that buzzed inside her to get off, you know, so.
That stuff has been going on since the beginning of time. Like, what's the big deal? Don't we have anything more important that we could be thinking about?
Then the Christians came around and they started ruining everything sexual. And then, oh my goodness, the devices they made to keep people from touching themselves is just ridiculous.
True. Modern physicians and psychologists are practically agreed that self-abuse, when practiced in moderation, does little, if any, harm. Except that physicians and psychologists do not actually refer to it as self-abuse, because it isn't. Actually, it's more abusive to deny all sexual thoughts and feelings and pretend they don't exist, or worse yet, demonize them to the point of psychosis. Y'all, this is where serial killers and rapists come from, for real. But as Christians, our concern is not primarily with the physical, but with the moral and spiritual aspects of it. Self-abuse, unless recognized as something unclean and to be striven against, can easily lead to such practices as fornication, adultery, sodomy, and lesbianism. not to say anything of depriving one's mate of the marriage due.
Wow, that escalated quickly. Look, you're not going to commit fornication or adultery all by yourself in your shower or whatever. And if you're not already gay or at least bisexual, you're not going to accidentally suck a dick. Unless you're a guy who's really flexible, I guess. Anyway, you're not going to become a lesbian just because you touched your own body. As for depriving one's mate of the marriage due, well, if that's happening, there is indeed a much bigger issue than just jerking off, and you probably need a therapist. If your spouse prefers solo sex to sex with you, then maybe that's a whole nother issue. Seriously, masturbation does not actually deprive anyone of anything in and of itself, and no one is entitled to the use of your body. And if you're one of those people who gets upset at the idea of your spouse ever having sexual feelings without you, then you probably need to see that therapist too, because that's just not healthy. For some people, masturbation is a healthy way to get a little dopamine going in the brain, and it has nothing to do with wanting a different partner or being a homo or any of that. It just has to do with stress relief and hormones and maybe alleviating depression. Seriously, if it's not your crotch, it's not your business.
The idea that if you have a partner, then you don't need to masturbate. I don't think that's true.
It's not.
Because it's a totally different thing.
I mean, just think about this, because not every man wants to have sex 24/7.
Right.
Okay. And that's a big statement, because usually there's the stigma on men always wanting to have sex.
Right.
Always. Right. And there are times when women want to have sex more than the men.
I can attest to that. That is true.
And so there are times when that woman will have to take matters into her own hands.
Yep.
Because she's not getting enough from her husband, who can't keep up with her.
Right. Sometimes that happens, but for a lot of women, the reasons why you might masturbate and the reasons why you might have sex with a partner are very different reasons.
Yeah.
Like, you're looking for a different thing out of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, getting off is great, but it's not always the end all be all point of the experience.
Right. Especially when they're repressed sexually and all that, they don't know their bodies.
So do you feel like you would have been better prepared for your sex life as an adult if you had masturbated?
Oh yeah. Yes, because when you know about your body and you know about what pleasures you, then you can communicate that to your partner. And if you never were taught that was okay, then there's always going to be this feeling of guilt and shame associated with pleasure, and that's just going to transfer over into any marriage or anything like that.
And I think for women, especially in the Kingdom Hall, there's this expectation that, sex is going to be this wonderful, amazing thing, but they don't know anything about their own body, and they expect men to know.
Good luck.
Before in their lives either. Like, suddenly you put these two people together who have no idea what they're doing. You end up with a lot of real unhappy folks.
Oh, yeah. And you also end up with a lot of people who are sexually incompatible as well, because they don't know what to do or how to do it.
Right. And they've not been able to experiment with that at all before getting married and being stuck with each other forever.
Let's move on. Our next article is entitled
Grand Blessings at the Men of Goodwill Assemblies.
It's from the Watchtower in 1970. Ooh boy.
One part considered the problem of masturbation. Although this is a practice frequently considered normal by worldly persons,
oh dear,
it was shown that it is a bad practice that can cause much harm.
Ew! They are so gross, and they are not even people. They are persons.
So what harm does this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad practice cause?
It can lead to homosexuality.
No it can't. And even if it did, so what? I mean, I hate to break it to you because this is obviously news to you guys, but homosexuals are awesome. They're clean, they dress well, they're mostly friendly and funny and charming, they're great for property values. They seem to enjoy life with a zest and zeal that a lot of us heteros just don't. They have awesome parades. So what if they like people whose private parts match theirs? I don't care what they do in their bedrooms. That's none of my business.
But what can be done to break this practice? To stop seems to be easier said than done, observed one teenager on the program.
Yeah, but why does it have to be broken? I mean, seriously, this is a non-issue. No one even knows you do it unless you tell them. It's none of their business.
I don't remember doing it intentionally until after the meeting one time where the talk was about masturbation. And I didn't know what that meant. When they said something about rubbing yourself, and how pleasurable it was, I went home and thought to myself, well, maybe I should try it, find out what it's about. It was just something girls didn't do. I mean, even if you did, you wouldn't ever admit it.
Now, I know that elders often ask young people, completely unprovoked, if they masturbate and how often, etc., which is really sick, and it's a boundary violation of the highest order. As a parent, if some dirty old man thought he was going to mentally and emotionally abuse my kid in this way, he'd be crawling back home with a permanent limp. I'm just saying.
You keep telling everybody don't. They're going to do.
Right. And I think they're counting on that because, again, they want people to be ashamed and in need of salvation.
Yeah.
Because if you're fine with your own body and you are a happy individual and you don't have anything that you need to repent for, they have no power.
A number of suggestions were given by the boy's father and a doctor friend. Particularly was the need of spiritual help stressed, turning to Jehovah in prayer and filling the mind with other matters when this urge arises.
Was the doctor friend a Jehovah's Witness? Because I feel like a real doctor would say, what's the big deal? As long as he's not locking himself in his room for hours at a time, leaving crispy socks everywhere and stinking up the place, I don't see the problem. Turning to Jehovah in prayer does absolutely nothing except focus your mind on what you're not allowed to do. It's kind of like me on a diet, I can't have chocolate cake, so what's the only thing I can think about? Also, if you constantly condition yourself from youth to suppress sexual urges, and you brainwash yourself like this every time you get a little frisky to mentally change the subject, some even going so far as to attach shame, disgust, and even pain to sexual thoughts and feelings to avoid masturbation, then you're going to have a big problem later when it's actually okay or even desired to actually have sex. Imagine marrying someone who has been raised this way. Ick.
Many were the expressions of appreciation for this frank and helpful consideration. A youth at the Anaheim, California Assembly said, "I've always wanted to talk to my dad about these things, but I didn't know if it would be right or not. Now I feel I can talk to my parents without any embarrassment."
Really, dude? You couldn't talk to your parents without embarrassment until after this incredibly embarrassing part on the assembly? Please, they totally made this up.
I feel I was fortunate in that my dad, even though he was an elder, never came down on me about it. But I know there's so many people that, whose parents were very hard on them on the subject. No pun intended. Well, maybe pun intended.
For you, maybe.
They always love to throw that scripture around about deadening your body members. And from a male perspective, okay, when you get morning wood, just for example, how can you control that? You can't.
Well, what's the fastest way to get rid of it?
Exactly.
No, instead they repress you and make you keep it that way as long as possible. They prolong the agony. And it's not about keeping you clean. It's about keeping you under control and keeping you feeling bad.
It is.
About yourself and about your body and about who you are.
And let's put it this way. Masturbation has zero risk of STDs.
Yep.
Zero risk of pregnancies.
Right.
And 100% risk of pleasure.
Like having a nice day. My sister and I were constantly in trouble when we were kids for either real or perceived.
Right.
My mom used to refer to it as playing butsy. I can remember being absolutely mortified when I was a child. I was maybe 6 or 7 and had a little friend from the hall over to spend the night. And we were just in there, giggling and being little girls. And my mom came in and was feeling my chest to see if my heart was racing and asked my friend if I was touching myself. And my friend was like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Mom, why would you even what is wrong with you? Why? I mean, even that young, no, you're embarrassing me, go away. You know, like, you don't do that with your friends, you weirdo.
No,
But
no.
that's the kind of parent that I had. My sister, we laugh all the time about our mom coming in like unannounced at night into our rooms and asking, like, smelling our hands.
Oh, jeez.
As if we smelled like anything, right? At that age.
My mom used to make me smell my used to smell my fingers too. Yeah, in the morning.
Bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Yeah. She was a very strange individual. And I've come to realize that not all of that was about being raised a witness, because she was raised a witness as well. My sister, she was very young, 5 or 6, maybe 7. She was caught masturbating and was told by our parents that they were going, since she was so proud of it, that they were going to make her go naked down to our grandparents' house and show everybody.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Well, they didn't actually do that, but I mean, she was horrified. Like,
Yeah.
I want to show it to everybody. I just was minding my own business, you know, and we all have, I mean, both of us have stories like that at different times in our lives that our parents were ridiculous. But then I think about, like, when I had children, looking at my babies and thinking, like, what were my parents thinking? Like, at what point do you look at your child and think that it's okay to teach them that their bodies are bad and sinful and wrong? I mean, that's just nuts. I just have reached a point of saying, okay, buddy, you really shouldn't do that. Just don't do that in front of me. Okay. I don't need to see it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying do it in private.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm telling him this one day when he was in the bath and I was helping him wash his hair. And I'm like, can you just not do that in front of me? Like, and he said, okay, can you leave? So, I'm out. Bye. See ya.
And that's all it should be. It should just be a conversation. Hey, this is what your body's going to eventually do. It's perfectly natural. Don't be scared.
What was your first, if you can remember, introduction to the idea of masturbation?
I don't remember being told about it. I do remember my pop-up timer kind of came around when I was like about 11 years old, and I started exploring it. Yes, pop-up timer.
I've never heard it called that before. That took me a second. Well, so I asked because I was thinking about it and, like, okay, sure, you have those times as a little kid where you touch yourself by accident and go, hey, that was kind of cool. And I mean, for a lot of girls, it's girls that have horses and ponies. A lot of us were introduced to that whole thing going horseback riding. And you don't know what it is. It's just like, hey, this is awesome.
I had to think about that one for a second, but yeah, now I get it.
That's why.
Gotcha.
But it's not, I mean, it's just like something that happens in passing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think about my introduction to the whole idea. I don't think that I would have done it as much or as often as I did as a child if I had not heard about it in the Kingdom Hall constantly at the meeting and the book study. And then my mom did family study, pardon my pun, religiously. But it was like all this talk about it that actually had the opposite effect of what they wanted. You know, they were saying, oh, it's bad, it's wrong. And so I was like, well, what are they talking about?
Well, how old were you the first time that you remember hearing a discussion about masturbation?
5 or 6.
Okay. Where did you hear it?
At the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, of course. My parents.
Did you feel comfortable with those kind of discussions?
No. Especially because the boy that I had a crush on was sitting in the row in front of me.
Our next article is from the Watchtower in 1970, and it's called
Avoiding the Snare of Homosexuality.
Y'all. Homosexuality is not a snare. I mean, there aren't queers lying in wait with butterfly nets or pit traps or whatever trying to catch unsuspecting Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, even if they were, how would that work? If they caught you, would you just automatically have to become gay yourself? I mean, you would just completely switch teams because someone gave you the homo cooties? Grow up.
Helpful in this regard, then, is appreciating the fact that autoeroticism, or masturbation, is no mere innocent pastime, but rather a practice that can lead to homosexual acts. My, how so?
Yes, brothers, tell us how. Because you're like, by yourself.
All by myself.
I mean, how are you going to accidentally start being gay because you rubbed one out by yourself with no one else?
in that self-induced masturbation may make it easier and more tempting for one to engage in mutual masturbation, which is a form of homosexuality.
My.
Sincerely striving against this practice will go far to protect a youth.
What is self-induced masturbation? What other kind of masturbation is there? Mutual masturbation is defined as a sexual activity in which more than one person masturbates together. They do not touch each other. Each of them touches only themselves. As such, I would argue that this is not a form of homosexuality at all. Some people might like to do it and let others watch and, whatever floats your boat. I mean, that would kill the mood for me, to be honest. But again, if I'm not doing it, then it has no effect on me and therefore is none of my business.
It got under my skin with this statement that they make about how masturbation can lead to homosexuality.
Oh, that is so stupid.
Oh my God. At the risk of too much information here, okay? I've beat it many, many times in my life. I'm still straight as an arrow.
Well, I mean, like most people, when they are doing that solo activity, right? They're not thinking about, oh, myself is so amazing. They're thinking about another person or a movie or a picture, or whatever floats their boat. It's funny that they try to draw that conclusion that, like, because you are the gender that you are, if you're touching yourself, then that means you're gay.
Yeah, saying like, well, if you touch yourself and maybe if you have a friend over, then you'll want to touch his too. I'm just like, no.
That has never
had that happen.
I've never been in a situation where I had a friend over and wanted to, like, masturbate together.
Yeah.
Like, never. Ever.
No. Okay. Do you remember, you probably remember this. Remember the days when the Playboy channel had all the squiggly lines and you could, like, catch little glimpses of things?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I remember I had a friend over one day and he was watching that at my house. He was sitting there literally fully clothed, okay? And he was beaten off, not so I couldn't see him, okay? Just trying to be real discreet about it.
Yeah.
So there was nothing like trying to do anything with me or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I would have still been like, dude, don't do that in front of me.
I was. Believe me. Believe me.
Right? Like, you're not like, yeah, let's join in.
Yeah. Well, just go ahead.
Unless you're already gay.
Just go ahead and pull it out and let's just do it all together. No. Dude, keep that mess to yourself.
Moving right along, next we have an article from The Awake in 1972 called Making a Success of Singleness.
In a similar vein, one does not succeed at singleness by falling into the practice of masturbation. Though many doctors claim that self-abuse does no harm, note what two authorities wrote in a marriage manual. Occasionally, young people who have practiced self-relief over a long period of time may find it difficult to readjust their sex habits and to derive complete satisfaction from the sex union in marriage.
Okay, first of all, I would think that you could be considered successful at singleness if you remained unmarried, right? I mean, the book they're quoting here is actually called A Marriage Manual, A Practical Guide to Sex and Marriage. It was written by Abraham and Hannah Stone, whoever they are, and was published in 1937. 35 years before this article was written. Remember that 1972 was well after the sexual revolution had started, and I am absolutely certain that there was a more recent and, dare I say, more complete source that they could have used here. Yeah, but regardless, you know why some people may have difficulty readjusting their habits to derive complete satisfaction from marriage? Because sometimes masturbation is more intense because there's no fumbling around. You know exactly what to do, how quickly, and for how long. Especially if you're a woman. Trust me on that. I mean, it's just common sense, y'all. So a partner would have to be screwing you very, very attentively for years to reach that level of understanding and familiarity. It's not wrong, it just is what it is. Many people don't ever derive complete and total sexual satisfaction from sex with someone else, no matter who it is, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's just because it's a totally different thing. It's not meant to replace masturbation, and masturbation isn't meant to replace sex with a partner. The Jehovah's Witnesses are doing themselves a grave disservice by promoting the idea that these are the same thing, because they're not.
Cases have come to our attention of men who became so controlled by this bad habit that they continued it after marriage, causing the family much grief.
Ooh, I do not even want to know how these cases came to the attention of Watchtower. Why would a man jerking off cause so much grief to his family? Why would a woman masturbating cause any grief to anyone? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, how would they even know? And if some dude's wife happened to accidentally walk in on him or vice versa, why was it a big deal? Why not just say, oops, come see me later, I got a job for that guy. She'd go running to call the elders immediately if this was a Jehovah's Witness couple, and that's where the grief comes in, y'all. Why is there an assumption that people never masturbate again once they're married? And that's so stupid. Our next article is from the Watchtower in 1973, and it's called Breaking Free of Self-Abuse. Why? How? Okay, I know what they mean by self-abuse, but every time I hear that phrase, I think about like shoving yourself down the stairs or something. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't automatically think of giving yourself an orgasm, which is one of the best feelings in the goddamn world. Don't think I'd call that self-abuse. If anything, that's self-care. I'm just saying. Now, if you have watched the other episodes in this series, then you'll know that I've covered this article before. But I think this one bears repeating because it's so bad. Oh my God. Listen to this.
If one understands the cause, it is easier to implement the prevention and cure of a bad habit. Did you know, for example, that mothers and fathers who stroke the genitals of their fretful babies to keep them quiet are unwittingly encouraging them to become masturbators later on?
Now I ask you, do you know anybody who has ever done this? Because this is child sexual abuse right here. For any of you who have never had a baby, it would also be a considerable risk because you never ever know what's going on inside a diaper. I'm also fairly sure that touching your kid's junk would not actually keep the kid quiet, so I really have no idea where these crazy evil people are even going with this nonsense. Anyway, moving right along, our next piece is the lovely questions from readers section from the Watchtower in 1974.
Does the porneia, gross sexual immorality, mentioned in the Bible include masturbation, making masturbation a valid basis for scriptural divorce? The Bible does not mention masturbation or self-abuse, and there is no indication that the Greek word porneia included this practice. Masturbation is definitely an unclean habit.
Not if you wash your hands,
This is evident from the fact that according to the Mosaic law, even an involuntary emission of semen made a man ceremonially unclean until the evening. This being the case, a deliberately induced emission of semen through masturbation would have been a greater uncleanness.
Hang on. This is not evidence. The Mosaic Law is an ancient set of rules written by ancient goat herds who didn't understand germ theory and thought the world was flat. If the Mosaic Law were evidence of something being true, then you'd have to say those polyester blend spandex leggings you're wearing are also unclean, and so is that shrimp scampi you just slurped down at Red Lobster. And why are they adding to the Bible here by assuming that there's a difference between a deliberate emission of semen and an involuntary one? Isn't it deliberate when you have sex with your congregationally approved spousal unit? And how long would you be unclean then? This is mind-bogglingly stupid.
But it was not as serious as the gross sexual immorality designated by the Greek word porneia. For example, adultery, homosexuality, and bestiality, different forms of porneia, were capital offenses under the law, and therefore paved the way for the surviving mate to remarry. But we can point to no evidence indicating that this was true of masturbation.
In case you missed it, if you cheated, even if you cheated with another person of the same sex, or if you decided to fuck a sheep or whatever, the goat herds would kill you and pave a nice little path for your spouse to remarry someone else who presumably wouldn't be attracted to farm animals, you weirdo. But even back then, they didn't go around killing people for flogging the bishop. So why is this such a big deal in Jehovah's Witness land? I also noticed that they did not actually answer the whole question here. So apparently someone in Ecuador caught their partner engaging in a little stress relief and wanted to get divorced about it. Wow. But sorry, dear, you're not getting out of your matrimonial arrangement that easily. One of y'all's got to cheat, and I mean really cheat, with someone of the opposite sex before you can get out of that deal without being forced to stay single and therefore celibate for the rest of your life, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
In the literature, they talk about wet dreams for boys. They talk about nocturnal emissions.
Yeah.
That sounds like something your car does. But they don't talk about anything similar for girls, right? Girls is always like, oh, menstruation, which I'm sorry, that is not the same thing. I thought it was interesting because I was looking at one of my older videos, and it struck me because the subject was about demons and how some women had even had dreams where they were sexually aroused and felt stimulated. So when a boy or a man has a sex dream, it's a natural, normal, nocturnal emission, right? And if a girl has a sex dream, it's demons.
She's having sex with demons, right? Is that where that whole demon sperm thing came from last year?
I have no idea.
It came to me in the middle of the night.
His name is Cletus. But also think about the elders and their questioning of people, right, in judicials. So do you think if somebody was accused of murder, would they be asking like, how many times did you stab him?
Yeah.
Like, did you get blood on your hands? Did it feel good?
How many drops of blood did you get on your hand?
Do you think that they're going to ask that kind of detail? No. And even like unsolicited questions to young people in the hall from elders about, brother so-and-so, do you have a masturbation habit?
I didn't get a lot of questioning about it, mainly because I'm a girl, I think. My brother had a harder time than I did. The elders were all over him about it. Of course, he wasn't very smart. He got called a lot.
No, I think I avoided those types of questions because no random elder ever came up to me and asked me if I ever masturbated or anything like that. But I think that's because my dad was an elder.
Probably.
So whenever they talked about sex or anything in the hall, to me, that was like the only time that we were able to openly talk about it. And my ears always perked up. Oh, I get to think about it. I kind of got like this sick enjoyment out of it.
Oh, everybody did. That's witness porn.
Let's take a look at the 5th chapter of that famous manual for youth, Your Youth, getting the best out of it. Again, you'll have seen this before in a previous episode, but
An attraction grows, and often boys develop a keen interest in girls, and girls in boys. But at the same time, you may have a certain wonderment and curiosity about your own rapidly changing body. How should you satisfy this curiosity?
well, I guess I could go get a mirror.
Should you experiment with your sex organs?
I'm not taking him to the lab, if that's what you're asking.
Is there anything wrong with rubbing them in some way until the excitement is climaxed?
Why would anyone ask this? Seriously, what could be wrong with it? What, God might be offended? Then why the hell did he make us with genitals that could be rubbed in some way until, stuff happens? I mean, I have to say that I've never been in the midst of a stress relief session and thought,
Gee, I wonder if there's anything wrong with this.
let me just think about it, being in the middle of anything and having the thought, this is awfully nice. I wonder if it's wrong. If it feels good, it must be wrong though, right? Idiots.
This practice is called masturbation. It is very common.
You've got to be kidding me.
One authority on the subject says, every serious statistical study that we have shows clearly that at least 95% of boys and young men between 13 and 25 years of age pass through periods of habitual masturbation of varying lengths. As for girls, this source says that 40 to 50% are found to actually masturbate.
I'm telling you, the statistic is way off. Everybody masturbates. Everybody does it at some point or another. Even girls. There are very few people who haven't done it regularly, and even fewer who haven't at least tried it.
Some people say that these figures prove normalcy and that the absence of masturbation in a healthy youth is a matter of concern. Now, what do you think?
I think you're full of shit, Watchtower.
From a physical standpoint, the majority of doctors say that occasional masturbation is harmless. Like most psychiatrists, they say that damage comes only if the practicer has feelings of guilt that cause mental and emotional disturbance, these in turn producing physical upset.
Oh, you mean like if you get caught masturbating or you feel so guilty about it that you confess to the elders and then you get reproved and semi-shunned? You mean like that? Or are you talking about the mental and emotional disturbance involved in believing that you're going to be murdered by God with a fireball from the sky at Armageddon because you had to relieve the pressure somehow before your head exploded? Or because you needed that little hit of dopamine in your brain to keep from committing suicide?
But doctors and psychiatrists are imperfect humans, subject to error, and their views change.
Are they implying that Jehovah's Witnesses are not imperfect humans subject to error? I mean, are they saying that the governing body's views do not change? Because if you believe that, you're a moron. At least when doctors and psychiatrists change their views about something, it's because of facts, data, and evidence, usually backed up by peer-reviewed empirical studies and whatnot. It's not new light.
Weakly giving in to sexual desires by masturbation will certainly not give you strength when faced with a situation tempting you to commit fornication or even homosexuality.
Oh! How do you figure? Hypothetically, if I'm confronted with temptation toward fornication, I'm much less likely to do it if I just got off. But I do know that there is no way I'm going to be tempted to have homosexual relations unless I am in fact homosexual.
Just the opposite, it cultivates wrong thinking and wrong desire. In fact, masturbation can lead into homosexuality. In such instances, the person, not satisfied with his lonely sexual activity, seeks a partner for mutual sex play.
Y'all, Nobody seeks out just any old partner for mutual sex play. I mean, gross, first of all. You're not going to seek out another person with the same genitals as you just because. If choking your chicken isn't doing it for you, you're going to go look for your ideal partner, not the first human body you come across, regardless of its condition, age, mileage, or plumbing. Come on, y'all. If you're going to make a ridiculous claim like this, at least think it through just a little bit.
This happens much more frequently than you may realize.
No, I really don't think it does.
Contrary to what many persons think, homosexuals are not born that way, but their homosexual behavior is learned.
Please cite your sources, Watchtower. I need to know how you can be so certain of this. Where are the studies? Where's the actual evidence?
And often a person gets started when very young by playing with another's sexual parts and then engaging in homosexual acts.
No, that's not how it works at all.
One young man relates, "When I was young, I had very little parental guidance. I was allowed to go my own way and do my own thing. It was when I was only about 8 years old that my older cousins introduced me to homosexual acts."
Well, that's a really odd way to say you were sexually molested.
"I found these pleasurable and so continued the practice with them later and with others."
Y'all, this is so awful. I guarantee you that this story is being cast as a decision by an unsupervised 8-year-old for a reason. Because he says the acts were pleasurable. I want you to understand how truly egregious this portrayal is. The handling of this subject in this story is unconscionable. There is so much wrong here. First of all, 8-year-olds do not have sex. They are not old enough to consent to sex regardless of whatever physical or emotional feelings may come up when they are molested by an older kid or by an adult. If a child like this is engaging in sex acts of any kind outside of maybe, possibly, physical mutual experimentation with another child of their same age, then they are being abused and something needs to be done about it. It certainly doesn't need to be treated like this.
Soon it was almost a daily activity. At first I had no realization of doing anything wrong. My parents had not given me any instruction regarding moral conduct, and I never confided in them.
Okay, so they're saying that it's his parents' fault that he was molested because they left him with his older cousins. I mean, this seems kind of suspect to me. Maybe his parents should have been a little more attentive, but we don't know any of the details here, and I'm more inclined to blame the actual perpetrators. You know, the people who actually molested the kid, than either the kid or his parents here. I mean, why does Watchtower never blame the perpetrator?
We then lived in a Central American country. Later, we moved to New York City, where I finished high school. I also continued homosexual practices.
Bet he was really good at it by then.
The schools and city are filled with homosexuals, so there were plenty of opportunities.
Wonder if there was any special concentration around Bethel.
As I grew older, I realized that what I was doing was unnatural and was not right, but I continued because I wanted to. These sex acts had become very enticing to me.
So how did he come to the conclusion suddenly that what he was doing was unnatural? I mean, it seemed pretty natural to him all his life. What would lead him to that conclusion if he enjoyed what he was doing and presumably by this point was an adult, engaging in consensual acts with other adults? I think we might be missing something here.
The youth was hooked on the practices, and it was only after great effort that he was able to overcome them. What motivated him to change? It was a desire to please Jehovah God.
Allow me to translate. He got sucked into a cult, which indoctrinated him into thinking that he was unnatural, bad, deviant, and in need of divine intervention, if in the form of a free home Bible study and copious love bombing and brainwashing.
When he understood that God views homosexual acts as unnatural and that he totally disapproves of them, the young man fought these practices until he had conquered them.
Get back, vile penis! I banish you! Back, I say!
Might I add that this entire diversion into the story of this sexually molested homosexual boy, man, person is in an article about masturbation. So the whole point of this very lurid story is to horrify and terrify Jehovah's Witnesses into not touching themselves.
There are, of course, many additional things of a simple and sensible nature that one can do to help avoid or reduce sexual tension.
Now they're going to give us some helpful advice on how not to masturbate. Y'all ready for this?
Being with others, provided, of course, that they are wholesome persons, is a protection.
Yeah, I'm not real sure about this. If I'm horny and I'm trying not to have sex, for some reason, being with the person or people I'm attracted to probably isn't going to help me remain chaste.
If you sleep in a room alone and you find that you seem to feel special stress in this direction at night, you may be able to arrange matters to share a room with another member of your family.
Word to the wise, this doesn't actually stop anyone from doing whatever they need to do. They just learn to do it real quiet.
Also, you may find it helpful to sleep on your side rather than on your back or face down.
How on earth would this keep somebody from masturbating? I mean, I guess if you're face up, it's too easy to reach your crotch. And then if you're face down, you could always rub against the mattress, since that seems to be a favorite method, according to the folks at Bethel.
This is not your bed buddy.
Not very effective, to be honest, but I guess it's better than absolutely nothing.
Yeah, well, that makes me wonder what it must be like at Bethel, or what these Watchtower writers are doing themselves.
No, what I'm more curious about at Bethel is, what do they name their pillows? All right, Janet, I gotta put you back down for a minute.
I don't want to know. Watching that video, first of all, that guy Gary Bro, his grosses me out. It's like instant gag reflex.
Well, see, there you go. There's all your anti-masturbation rhetoric you need right there. If you ever get the urge, watch Gary Bro.
Suppose a brother starts rubbing his genitals against a pillow. He gets an erection, but stops before having an orgasm. Is he masturbating? Yes.
Who's humping their pillow? Could it be Gary Bro?
Another thing that may be helpful is to see that your clothing does not unnecessarily cause friction with the sexual organs.
What the hell kind of clothes are they wearing?
Them tight pants don't make it any easier for us to not want to.
I will tell you right now that I have never worn clothing that caused friction with my hoo-ha and had it be a positive or pleasant experience. If your clothing is tight, it is generally not a very comfortable thing. It certainly wouldn't be enough to get someone off unless they had been seriously pent up. Just saying.
Before retiring, try to see that what you read or talk about has a calming effect rather than the opposite. So too with any eating that you do at this time.
Seriously. Eating? Are they saying that there are foods that make you masturbate? Seriously? What kind of food could they be talking about?
Some have even found that if they limit the amount of food and drink they consume before retiring, they sleep more soundly and are not so inclined to be aroused sexually.
All right, it sounds like to me that this writer was just horny as hell and attributed it to any and everything that they did. I mean, this sounds like someone in a state of total deprivation. Don't eat, don't drink, don't think about it, don't touch it, ignore it. Maybe it'll go away. Never, ever works. Y'all just choke the chicken and get it over with. Everybody's gonna be much happier.
And especially important is good masculine or feminine hygiene. Lack of cleanliness can produce irritation of the genital organs and pull one's attention in that direction. You can inquire of your parents for information on such matters of personal hygiene.
Oh my God. What? Look, genital irritation is not, I repeat, not going to result in masturbation. If anything, a yeast infection or something is going to keep you from doing it because, let's be honest, that shit hurts.
Proper hygiene calls for certain handling of the sexual organs, and one might feel that this would be a temptation to misuse them. But because your motive is right, with the aim of avoiding sexual tension, you may well find that such care will instead help you to take a more healthful view toward these organs. You will appreciate that they were never meant to take you over and rule your whole life.
I don't know about you, but I've never felt like my genital organs were taking over and ruling my life. These people are weird. I want you to think about this for just a moment. These people are so afraid they can't even touch their own genitals in the shower for fear of misusing them. They might produce some sort of sensation, and that could be wrong. What the actual fuck is wrong with them?
If you are now fighting the practice of masturbation,
I wouldn't exactly call it a fight.
Remember, you are certainly not the first or only one who has faced this problem. Even though you find yourself having a hard struggle to break the masturbation habit, never feel that Jehovah God and his son Jesus Christ have given up on you.
I am sorry, brother. You were saying?
That's right. Jehovah God and his son Jesus Christ, by which I mean Watchtower, will never give up on making you feel ashamed, inadequate, and unworthy.
If you sincerely keep working to overcome it, they will kindly and patiently help you to build up the needed strength so that you can come off victorious.
Did they seriously just say, come off victorious? Our next article is from the Watchtower in 1985, and it's entitled,
Accept God's Help to Overcome Secret Faults. As a young man, C had normal sexual feelings, but he also had a problem. From the age of 13, he had the habit of self-abuse, usually in the secrecy of his bedroom. He was a bit ashamed of it, but he felt that it was not hurting anyone else.
You know, I think this would actually fit into the category of normal sexual feelings for a 13-year-old boy. I don't see a problem here, aside from the fact that he feels ashamed of it, but he's right, it's not really hurting anyone else, so
By the time he was 19, the practice was ingrained. On occasion, C confessed it to his priest, but he was told that though wrong, it was not serious.
When a habit, belief, or attitude is ingrained, it is firmly fixed or established and difficult to change, according to the Oxford Dictionary. So old Chuck, we could call him Chuck, he had a habit of masturbating in the privacy of his own room.
When C joined the military, he did not have much privacy, hence he seldom resorted to self-abuse, which incidentally shows that his past habit was not the result of uncontrollable passion.
Or alternatively, it could show that he was exhausted, as most military trainees are, and was too tired for all that mess. Or that he is a private person who doesn't want to masturbate in front of his whole battalion. Also, does anyone masturbate out of uncontrolled passion? I think not. Again, I fail to see a problem here, except maybe he's feeling a little stressed.
Upon getting out of the military, C returned home. He began purchasing pornographic magazines, and aroused by these, he was soon back to his former ways. When he began living alone, it was easy to get sexually stimulating material.
Why?
Often, he masturbated several times a day.
And it wasn't really a problem. I mean, he wasn't hurting anybody, his brain got some dopamine, the newsstand got a few bucks for selling the magazine. It's a win-win.
Then he began to study the Bible with a minister of Jehovah's Witnesses.
There's your trouble.
As he learned God's view of immorality, C felt ashamed of purchasing pornographic materials, and he wanted to break the habit of self-abuse. He tried, but after a week or two, he would feel sexual tension, would stop by some newspaper stand, and would become aroused by the immoral material. Back home, he would feel that since he had already failed, he might as well go one step further. Afterward, remorse would come. Would he ever be able to break this bad habit?
So this illustrates how Watchtower has created a problem that did not formerly exist, really, in this guy's life. He has clearly masturbated in private and as needed his entire life, with no adverse effect. It never caused him a real problem until he became a Jehovah's Witness and swallowed all the shame and the guilt.
Finally, C spoke to a spiritual elder in the congregation. This minister was understanding and helped him to look up Bible-based material that would help him to improve his self-control.
What was this guy, some kind of masturbation prevention ninja? This is embarrassing enough already, but just wait, it gets worse.
The minister also explained, imagine the desire to be like a chain. The first link is small and weak, but each successive link gets larger and harder.
Does it really? Does it get larger and harder? Also, that's not how chains work.
That is the way it is, with urges leading to masturbation, so you need to stop the impulse as soon as possible.
I agree. Go ahead, rub one out, and move on with your life, honey.
The longer it goes on, the more intense your desire becomes. Finally, it will be almost unstoppable. Yes, try to break the chain at the first link.
Incidentally, the control of sexual urges and feelings and activity is a hallmark of a cult or high control group.
As soon as you sense the urge coming, do something.
Like, I don't know, masturbate.
Get up and change your position. Polish your shoes. Empty the garbage can. Anything to break the link.
But you're going to want to be careful with that conditioning, y'all. If you do this hard enough, you might find yourself oddly turned on by the smell of shoe polish or the idea of taking out the trash.
You might begin reading something out loud, such as the Bible, or a Christian publication that will channel your thoughts along clean lines.
You could read an article like this one, which dwells on the very thing you're trying not to think of. Or you could read the Bible, maybe Song of Solomon.
This minister would inquire of C at the meetings as to how things were going, regularly commending and encouraging him in his resolve.
OMG, can you imagine how embarrassing this would be?
Hi, brother, how's that masturbation thing coming? Have you jerked off this week? Oh, only 12 times. Well, that's better than last week.
For 7 weeks, C succeeded. Then when he was frustrated and discouraged over another problem, he succumbed again, buying some erotic literature. That led to a relapse. Such episodes were setbacks, but the minister urged him to continue the struggle.
Sure he did. Otherwise, he wouldn't have any excuse to talk to him about his junk constantly. Come on.
Gradually, the intervals lengthened to 9 weeks, then 17 weeks, then even longer. Slowly, his confidence grew that he would be able to master the secret problem.
Well, it's not exactly a secret now, is it?
Finally, C faced up to the fact that Jehovah knew all that he was doing. Thus, if he wanted to serve God with a completely clear conscience, he would have to get this practice out of his life totally.
If Jehovah was real, he would not only have known what this guy was doing, but he would have been the one actually responsible for it in the first place, because he supposedly created the dick and also the hormones that told it to do its thing on the regular. Therefore, either God made a mistake with the creation of the dick, or else God is the one who is a dick. Either way, I don't think Chuck's conscience should have been part of the equation, do you?
He did it. Now, he is not even able to recall how long it has been. As an exemplary Christian, C has been given responsibility in the congregation, and he is making plans to increase his service to God's praise.
Yay for Chuck! He's succeeded in giving away complete control of his life to a cult. He has deadened his own sexuality and is in the process of becoming a repressed person who ironically will be less likely to be able to control himself in a sexual situation in the future. That is, if he is ever actually able to be in a sexual situation now that he's a Jehovah's Witness.
He is a different person.
No, he is not a different person. He's just not jerking off right now. He's still Chuck. He's been magically transformed into an asexual uber-dub Jehovah bot at the moment, but biology's really frickin' strong, so check back in a year or two. Chuck, let us know how that's going. Our next article is from The Awake in 1987, and it's entitled, "Why Is It So Hard to Avoid Masturbation?"
One young man admits, "The root of my whole problem with masturbation boiled down to what I put in my mind. I would watch TV programs that included immorality, and in some cases watch programs on cable TV that would show nudity. Such scenes are so shocking that they stay with you. They would surface again in my mind, providing the mental fuel needed to engage in masturbation."
One may or may not need mental fuel to engage in masturbation. Some people do, some people don't. Sure, certain shows or movies or whatever might turn your crank a little bit, and that's okay. If you have the freedom and wherewithal to go take care of those feelings appropriately and privately, then there's not really a problem here. But if you are, in fact, a repressed cultist who is expected to expunge and cauterize any and all sexuality from your being until it's organizationally approved, well,
so often it is what one reads, watches, or listens to for entertainment, talks about, or meditates on that makes it hard to avoid masturbation. Therefore, being careful about what you take into your mind is essential to break this habit.
Yes, you should feed your mind a steady diet of guilt and shame about the natural operations of your body. That'll keep you from feeling horny. Just read the Watchtower. You'll come away feeling so disgusting and unworthy that you'll never want to touch yourself again.
As a 25-year-old woman confessed, I just couldn't seem to stop the habit. However, I used to read romance novels, and this contributed to the problem.
Oh, will you look at that? They've decided to acknowledge that women exist and might actually have a sexual feeling occasionally, but only when they read dirty smut novels.
Interestingly, it was not simply sexually unclean thoughts that led to her practice of masturbation. Indeed, her experience reveals perhaps the greatest reason why the habit is so hard to break. The young woman continues, "Usually, I masturbated to release pressure, tension, or anxiety. That fleeting pleasure was like the drink the alcoholic takes to calm his nerves."
Why would they compare masturbation to alcoholism?
Hold on. Now, brothers, as we know, masturbation is bad.
I mean, really, alcoholism impacts a person's entire life. It can ultimately kill you. It can certainly destroy your relationships and careers and all that. Comparing that to touching your own body is just ludicrous on a whole new level.
Dr. Sherwin Woods adds, "A high proportion of masturbatory experiences are motivated less by erotic needs than by general anxiety, tension, and boredom, for which it becomes a sought-for tranquilizer. So when one is upset, depressed, lonely, or under much stress, this habit becomes a convenient tranquilizer to blot out one's troubles."
No, masturbation does not blot out one's troubles. It's just something that releases dopamine in the brain and therefore keeps you from jumping off the nearest cliff. Again, I fail to see the problem here. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses take medicine for their inevitable depression, don't they? They get massages and go to chiropractors or physical therapists if their back hurts and they can afford it, don't they? I mean, what's so bad about a tranquilizer if, in fact, a tranquilizer is needed?
Therefore, to avoid masturbation, you must recognize this is an immature way to deal with problems and be willing to put away the traits of a babe. Masturbation is a childish way to react to problems.
Okay, so maybe if masturbation is your only strategy to cope with everything, then maybe that could be somewhat problematic, but I kind of doubt it. All this is an attempt to further shame people who do it. Not only are you unclean and weak and unworthy, you're also childish and immature now. Great.
Once ingrained, these traits of a babe can persist in adulthood. As an example, at the age of 9, a boy on one occasion was confronted with a very difficult mathematical problem at school. He first resorted to masturbation to soothe his mind.
You know, I really hope he wasn't up in front of the class at the chalkboard at the time.
After that, he turned to the habit whenever he could, when facing a knotty problem. Now, as an adult, he admits to this day, a very hard piece of brain work calls up in me the strongest impulse to masturbate. Without this, I can hardly work.
Well, you know, as long as he's doing it in private, I'd kind of call that a motherfucking superpower. All he has to do to figure out the answer to hard problems is jerk off? Dude, that would be awesome.
While the previous case may be extreme, there is real danger in using this tranquilizer to try to sidestep emotionally difficult situations. But rather than mentally escaping through masturbation, show thinking ability and attack the problem itself.
Okay, seriously, y'all, nobody expects masturbation to solve problems. I mean, other than the occasional unwanted hard-on or something. Masturbation in this context just settles the mind a little bit so the person can think clearly, and then they solve the problem. Watchtower's so lazy with their logic.
After struggling with masturbation for over 15 years from the time he was 11 years old, one man confessed, "It is a very strong addiction. It is not something to take lightly. It can be just as habit-forming as any drug or alcoholic beverage."
Okay, there are people out there who actually do become addicted to masturbation, but it isn't because masturbation's like crack or something. It's because the person has an addictive personality and probably a pretty shitty life. If the only good feeling you can get is from jerking off, well, what are you supposed to do?
The book Your Growing Child by Penelope Leach explains the pleasure and relaxation he can get from masturbation has become compulsive because other aspects of his life are intolerable to him. Like a true addict, he must masturbate more and more, and by doing so, he increasingly cuts himself off from alternative pleasures.
But this is not going to happen to every person who masturbates. The large majority of human beings do not have intolerable lives from which they must escape frequently through whatever means necessary. My advice? Don't struggle, just do it when you need to. In private, it's none of anyone else's business. Okay, to close the episode off with something real sad, we're going to look at an Awake article from 1997 entitled,
"Will God Stay, My Friend?" But what if it seems as if your prayers are not being answered? Laura, for example, was struggling to overcome the bad habit of masturbation.
Well, wonders never cease. They've acknowledged females again. This is downright progressive.
"I would talk to Jehovah about the problem honestly," she explains, "but I just couldn't seem to stop. Sometimes God may allow us to demonstrate how serious we are about our request. We must therefore persist in prayer."
Right. It's not enough to ask a parental figure sincerely and honestly for help with something that does no damage and hurts no one, just because said parental figure doesn't like it. Laura here has to prove how ashamed and mortified she is. She has to beg Jehovah for his help. As if this whole bullshit problem weren't his fault in the first place. As if he were real or something.
Laura did just that. At the same time, she began applying suggestions that appeared in material on the subject in Watchtower Society publications.
So she prayed and polished her shoes while lying on her side. She took out the trash, read the Bible, wore a gigantic muumuu, sang some kingdom songs, and then hopped into bed with her parents.
In time, she began seeing results. She recalls, "Every time I successfully resisted temptation, I would thank Jehovah because I knew he was with me. True, you may suffer some relapses as you struggle to gain the mastery over your problem. But as long as you are fighting and are not deliberately giving in to your weaknesses, God will be pleased by your earnest efforts and will remain your friend."
And if you behave like a normal human being, well, he's not going to be your friend anymore. Like a snotty little third grader.
So how old were you the first time that you masturbated?
I was 43. If you go into a marriage knowing what you like and can communicate that to your partner, that's only going to enhance your marriage. Also, if you go into a relationship or whatever, or no, if you just go through life knowing how to take care of yourself, then it's just going to lead to a more fulfilling life, and you're not going to have to depend on anybody to take care of that part of you. It's something you do for yourself. It's self-care. If I would have known that years ago, that would have been good.
I know you're asking right now, if you're a woman coming out of the Watchtower who may or may not have any experience with sexual feelings at all, much less masturbation, what the heck do you do? How do you even approach this?
Get a vibrator.
Should you try to learn how to masturbate? Well, if you feel like it, yeah, why not? If you don't, then don't. It will make absolutely no difference whatsoever to anyone but you, and maybe your partner if you're actually sexually active. It might actually be helpful to your partner if you know what feels good. After all, I'm going to put some links in the description to a few starting points for you. One's an article from Planned Parenthood. Another is a guide to masturbation from WebMD. WebMD, folks, it's not Satan.com. I promise. And finally, there's a how-to for women from Healthline that you might find helpful. Above all, have fun with whatever it is you decide to do, and don't feel like you have to write in and tell me about it or anything. Trust me, I probably don't need to know.
Pop-up timer ding.
Pop-up timer. Pop up at any timer.
I hope you found this discussion pleasurable. I'll see you next time. Until then, I'm Sister Fister. This is crazy.